Dolly Parton is a name that almost everyone recognizes. With her signature big hair, sparkling outfits, and warm, infectious laugh, she seems like the embodiment of joy and positivity. But what if that cheerful image you see on stage and screen is only part of the story? Behind the glitter and charm, Dolly's journey through fame has a hidden side, one filled with challenges, sacrifices, and struggles she's kept under wraps for decades. When you think about Dolly, you probably picture a woman who's lived a dream, from humble beginnings to country music royalty, who's inspired millions with her songs and kindness. Yet, like so many stars, the fame she earned came at a price. The bright spotlight often hides shadows, and for Dolly, those shadows have been carefully concealed. She shared a lot with the world, but some truths about the cost of her success have only recently begun to surface. This video dives deep into the untold story of Dolly Parton, the ugly side of fame she hid for years. It's not just about the obvious struggles of being famous, but about the unexpected loneliness, the personal sacrifices, and the battle behind the scenes that rarely make the headlines. What pressures did Dolly face as she rose from a small-town girl to one of the most beloved entertainers in the world? How did she keep her public image so perfectly polished while wrestling with her own pain and doubts? What you'll discover is that Dolly's story isn't just about glitz and glamour. It's about resilience in the face of isolation, strength despite heartbreak, and a fierce determination to control her own narrative in an industry that often tries to define artists in narrow boxes. It's about how she used humor and storytelling as a shield and a weapon, turning her struggles into songs that resonate with millions. By the end, you might see Dolly Parton in a completely new light, not just as a country legend, but as a complex human being who had the darker truths of her fame behind that unforgettable smile. So, if you thought you knew everything about Dolly, think again. The story you're about to hear reveals the hidden price of celebrity, the secret battles fought out of the public eye, and the strength it takes to shine bright when the world expects you to never dim. Let's start at the beginning. How a girl from Tennessee stunned the world, and why her rise was just the first step in a complicated journey few truly understand. Dolly Parton's story begins far from the bright lights and sold-out arenas. She was born in 1946 in a tiny one-room cabin in Sevier County, Tennessee, the fourth of 12 children. Life was simple, but tough. Growing up poor in rural Appalachia, Dolly learned early the value of hard work and determination. Singing wasn't just a dream, it was a way out. Her rise to fame feels almost like a fairy tale. At just 10 years old, Dolly was already performing on local radio shows, captivating audiences with her powerful voice and charming personality. By the time she was a teenager, she was touring with her family's band, slowly building a name for herself in the country music world. But the leap from local talent to global superstar wasn't easy or straightforward. Dolly moved to Nashville in her late teens, the heart of the country music industry, with nothing but a suitcase and a head full of dreams. The industry back then was a tough place for a young woman from a poor background. Many doors were closed to her, and she faced skepticism from record labels who doubted whether someone like Dolly could sell records beyond the South. Still, her talent was undeniable. Songwriters and producers took notice, and before long, she began writing hits not just for herself, but for other major stars. Her songwriting skills were a secret weapon, giving her more control than many performers ever had. By the late 1960s, Dolly was breaking through, but her fame was just beginning. What made Dolly different wasn't just her voice or songwriting. It was her ability to connect with people on a deeply emotional level. Her songs spoke to real struggles, heartbreak, poverty, dreams, and the everyday life of working-class Americans. This authenticity made her beloved, but it also meant that her success came with intense pressure to maintain a relatable image while navigating an industry that wanted her to fit a particular mold. Her career exploded in the 1970s with hits like Jolene and I Will Always Love You. Suddenly, Dolly was everywhere on television, in movies, and selling out concerts. Her signature look, a mix of glamour and down-home charm, became iconic. But behind the scenes, the demands of constant touring, recording, and public appearances took a toll. Fame brought more than applause. It brought expectations. Dolly had to carefully manage her image to appeal to a wide audience. Any misstep could damage her reputation. But the public didn't always see the late nights, the exhaustion, or the moments when she felt the weight of being a role model, entertainer, and businesswoman all at once. This rapid rise meant Dolly's personal life was often sacrificed. Time with family and friends became rare, and the loneliness of being famous started to creep in. What happens when the whole world knows your name, but no one knows the real you? That question would haunt Dolly for years, even as she appeared to be living the dream. The journey from a poor girl in Tennessee to country music royalty is one of grit and determination, but it's only part of the story. What most don't realize is that the higher Dolly climbed, the more complicated things became, not just in her career, but in her life. And the pressures she faced weren't just about music or fame. They cut deeper. How did Dolly balance the image the world expected with the private struggles she fought alone? That's where the story gets much more complicated. To the world, Dolly Parton is a ray of sunshine, always smiling, always cracking jokes, always graceful. She seems almost untouchable. Over the decades, she's built a brand so carefully curated that even people who don't listen to country music admire her charm. But behind the flawless image is something she rarely speaks about: the pressure of being Dolly all the time. From the very beginning of her fame, Dolly understood the power of persona. The big blonde wigs, the rhinestone dresses, the sweet southern drawl. It was all intentional. She once famously said, "It takes a lot of money to look this cheap," poking fun at herself before anyone else could. That quote became a shield. Humor became armor. And it worked. Audiences loved her. She was approachable, funny, and never took herself too seriously. But building that image came with a cost. As her star rose, so did the expectations. Dolly became known for being the woman who never had a bad day, never lost her cool, never let anyone see her sweat. That kind of emotional invisibility is exhausting. Behind the scenes, she was navigating a male-dominated industry that often dismissed her as just a pretty face in a sparkly dress. Many executives didn't take her seriously, not until she proved time and time again that she was not only the voice, but the brains behind her success. Still, the pressure to always be on never faded. Dolly couldn't afford to break down in public, even when she was going through personal struggles. She once admitted in an interview that she often cried alone in hotel rooms, far from home, overwhelmed by the pace and loneliness of her life. But when the cameras came on, that smile returned, just as the world expected. It's important to understand that Dolly isn't fake. She's not pretending to be someone else. But being Dolly Parton became a kind of role, one she had to play perfectly every single day. Any sign of weakness could be seen as failure. Any crack in the image could be blown out of proportion by tabloids or misused by critics. So she learned to hide the hard parts, to carry pain quietly and present strength even when she felt like breaking. What's even more surprising is how long she kept some of those struggles hidden. It wasn't until recent years, in more personal interviews, that Dolly hinted at the emotional weight she's carried for decades. The anxiety, the exhaustion, the feeling that even when millions loved her, very few really knew her. Fans saw the glitter, but they didn't always see the grit. Her carefully constructed public image gave her control in a chaotic industry, but it also trapped her. She couldn't just be herself on a bad day. She had to be Dolly, always, and that meant hiding pain behind punchlines, turning heartbreak into hit songs, and smiling through moments that would crush most people. But as we'll see next, that perfect image didn't just protect Dolly. It also masked the battles she had to fight just to be taken seriously. By the time Dolly Parton reached mainstream success, she wasn't just a country star. She was a household name. But what many don't realize is that behind her sweet persona was a fierce, determined artist constantly fighting to control her own destiny. Fame may have made her a star, but it didn't hand her power. She had to claw for every inch of it. When Dolly first stepped into the male-dominated world of Nashville, it wasn't just her talent that stood out, it was her defiance. She refused to be told what to sing, how to look, or who to be. That didn't sit well with certain industry executives who expected women to be quiet, compliant, and grateful. But Dolly had no intention of being a puppet. Her early years working alongside country legend Porter Wagoner were both a blessing and a burden. He gave her a platform on his popular TV show, but when she decided to go solo and carve out her own identity, the split was anything but friendly. The tension escalated into a legal battle that dragged on publicly, a rare and risky move for a young female artist at the time. But Dolly stood her ground, even writing the now iconic song, I Will Always Love You, as a goodbye letter to him, part heartbreak, part declaration of independence. That was just the beginning of her struggle for creative control. As she transitioned into pop music in the late 70s and early 80s, many critics accused her of selling out or abandoning her roots. But Dolly knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't running from her identity. She was expanding it, and it worked. Songs like 9 to 5 became cultural anthems, and her starring role in the film of the same name proved she wasn't just a singer, she was a multi-hyphenate force. Still, the industry kept trying to fit her into boxes. At every turn, she was underestimated, dismissed for her looks, mocked for her style. But while they laughed, she built an empire. She launched her own record label, Dollywood Dean Park, and a series of smart business ventures that gave her the financial freedom most artists never achieve. And yet, the fight never fully stopped. Dolly had to work twice as hard to be seen as more than a caricature. Her intelligence was often overshadowed by her physical appearance. Something she once admitted was by design. I'm not offended by dumb blonde jokes because I know I'm not dumb, she said. I also know I'm not blonde. It was a clever play on perception, a reminder that Dolly was always in on the joke. But that control came from years of pushing back against people who want to control her. Even now, decades into her career, she's still asked to explain herself in ways that male stars never are. The industry battles didn't break her, but they left scars. Battles fought quietly behind smiles and stage lights. But what happened when those professional fights began bleeding into her personal life? That's where things started to take a heavier toll, one that couldn't be fixed by another hit song. Fame is loud, but the hardest battles Dolly Parton faced happened in silence, far from the cameras, applause, and sold-out crowds. As the public clung to her image of strength and sparkle, few realized that Dolly was quietly crumbling under pressure. She had become a symbol of resilience. But even symbols break. In the early 1980s, at the height of her career, Dolly found herself spiraling. The non-stop touring, media appearances, and growing business demands had left her completely depleted, emotionally and physically. She was exhausted, but there was no space to rest. The world expected her to be upbeat and energetic, even when she could barely get out of bed. Privately, she battled intense depression. She later admitted that it reached a point so dark, she considered ending her own life. That revelation shocked fans who had never seen even a hint of sadness in her public persona. Dolly said she kept the pain to herself because she didn't want to worry anyone. Not her fans, not her family, not even her inner circle. She felt like she had to carry it alone. The emotional collapse was triggered in part by years of self-neglect. She pushed her health to the limit, often put her needs last while trying to live up to the version of herself the world adored. She turned to food for comfort, which caused weight fluctuations and deepened her insecurities. And although she never went public with specific names, rumors swirled for years about betrayal in her personal relationships. Friends who used her, business partners who took advantage, and unspoken heartbreak she buried under work. She once said, "I'm a very sensitive person. I just don't show it." That sentence says more than it seems. Dolly's pain never fit her public brand, so she kept it locked away. But that emotional suppression nearly destroyed her. Even more tragically, she revealed that at one point, she had a gun in her bedside drawer and had seriously thought about using it. The only thing that stopped her, she said, was the sudden appearance of her dog, Popeye, who jumped on the bed and looked at her in a way that broke the moment. That small interruption, that quiet nudge from a loyal pet, pulled her back from the edge. She interpreted it as a divine sign, a reminder that she wasn't alone, even in her darkest hour. She didn't go public with these struggles until years later, when the wounds had scarred over and the world saw her as invincible. But by sharing them, she reminded everyone that even the strongest, brightest people can suffer silently. Dolly's story became a quiet anthem for mental health awareness, proof that even icons carry invisible pain. Yet she didn't let those dark chapters define her. She clawed her way out of depression, refocused her purpose, and learned to set healthier boundaries. But the scars never completely faded. The glitter might have fooled the world, but behind the rhinestones was a woman who had nearly lost everything, including herself. And as we'll see next, not even her success could shield her from the controversy and whispers that began to swirl in the shadows of her fame. For someone so universally loved, Dolly Parton has always kept the public at arm's length when it comes to her personal life. That distance only fueled rumors, and over the years, those whispers have become a shadowy part of her story. Beneath the adoration, there's been relentless speculation about her marriage, her friendships, even her appearance. And through it all, Dolly has said little, choosing silence over scandal, but the silence only made the mystery louder. One of the longest-running topics of speculation is her marriage to Carl Dean, a man few fans have ever even seen. Married since 1966, Dolly and Carl have lived nearly separate public lives. He rarely appears with her at events and has never sought the spotlight. That fueled decades of rumors that their marriage wasn't real, or worse, that it was a cover. Some tabloids even suggested Carl didn't exist at all, which Dolly found both insulting and hilarious. "He's very real," she once said with a laugh. "He just doesn't want to be involved in the fame, and I respect that." Still, the absence of Carl Dean only added fuel to another fire. Whispers about Dolly's close relationships with women, especially longtime friend and assistant Judy Ogle. Their bond goes back to childhood, and they've been nearly inseparable ever since. But as the world became more curious and more invasive, Dolly chose to shut down speculation. She's repeatedly said that their friendship is deep, loyal, and entirely platonic. But for some, the lack of transparency only raised more questions. Then there's the topic of her appearance. Over the decades, Dolly has been open, even proud, about using cosmetic surgery. But that honesty didn't stop the media from tearing her apart. Every change in her look became tabloid fodder. She's been called fake, plastic, even unrecognizable. But behind the jokes and harsh headlines was a woman choosing to present herself exactly how she wanted. "I'm not offended by it," she said. "This is who I am, and I like looking this way." But it's not just looks or relationships that spark controversy. Even Dolly's politics, or lack of public stance, have come under fire. In an era where celebrities are often pressured to speak out, Dolly has remained famously neutral. She's avoided aligning herself with political parties. Even when asked directly, some fans have praised her for staying above the fray. Others have criticized her silence as avoidance. Yet Dolly seems fully aware of the role she plays in people's lives. She once said, "I'm not a political person. I'm a spiritual person." That line reveals more than people give it credit for. Dolly has built a persona that's larger than life. But when it comes to real life, she plays by her own rules. Her focus has always been on unity, not division. And while that's earned her admiration, it's also left room for constant interpretation. The truth is, Dolly Parton has never owed the world an explanation. But the price of fame means she's constantly dissected by people who think they know her. She's lived under a microscope for over 50 years, and still, she's managed to protect the parts of herself that matter most. But even with all her control, not everything stayed hidden. Because what came next would prove just how dangerous the cost of fame could be, and how close Dolly came to losing everything she built. In the 1980s, Dolly Parton was at the top of her game. chart-topping hits, movie deals, and a brand that was growing faster than ever. But behind the scenes, she was caught in a web of lawsuits, financial tension, and betrayal that few fans ever saw coming. What almost no one knew at the time was that Dolly's empire was on the edge of collapse. Not because of a failed project, but because of the people she trusted most. It all started with her management and inner business circle, the team that helped turn her stardom into a machine. As Dolly expanded into film, launched her Dollywood theme park, and grew her record label, the stakes rose fast. She needed help managing it all, and that meant bringing in partners, managers, and advisors. But fame makes you a target. And even for someone as sharp as Dolly, loyalty can be a double-edged sword. By the late 80s, whispers began circulating that someone close to her had been mismanaging funds, and worse, making business decisions behind her back. While Dolly never confirmed exact names or details, legal documents and industry rumors pointed toward financial irregularities and broken contracts. According to multiple reports at the time, millions of dollars had been mishandled. Lawsuits started to appear quietly, tucked away from the spotlight, as Dolly scrambled to regain control. At one point, there were rumors that she might lose major rights to her own music, the very songs that made her a star. One industry insider claimed she was just days away from signing away part of her publishing in exchange for a short-term financial bailout. Had she gone through with it, she could have lost ownership of hits like Jolene and I Will Always Love You Forever. It didn't help that the press caught wind of the turmoil. Tabloids ran headlines hinting at embezzlement, betrayal, and secret breakdowns. One even suggested she was considering early retirement to escape the chaos. For Dolly, who had built her image on strength and grace, this kind of exposure felt like a personal violation, but she didn't fold. Instead, she quietly cut ties, restructured her team, and doubled down on the business. She leaned on a few trusted allies, made bold calls to protect her assets, and refused to let shame or fear dictate her next move. And in classic Dolly fashion, she kept smiling in public, never letting the cracks show. Looking back, she's admitted that it was one of the lowest periods of her life, not because of money, but because of the heartbreak that comes with betrayal. It wasn't the business problems that hurt me the most, she once said. It was realizing some people I loved didn't love me back the same way. She emerged from the scandal with her reputation intact, which in Hollywood is rare. She not only saved her empire, but made it stronger. She became more selective, more guarded, and more determined than ever to protect what she'd built. And as the dust settled, one thing became clear. Dolly Parton wasn't just a survivor of fame. She was its master. But even she couldn't avoid the one thing that every icon eventually has to face, the legacy they leave behind. After decades of fame, fortune, and unimaginable pressure, Dolly Parton has become more than just a country singer. She's a symbol of strength, of survival, of authenticity in an industry that thrives on illusion. But her journey hasn't been the polished fairy tale many think it is. It's a story of clawing through darkness, smiling through betrayal, and fighting for control in a world that tried to write her script for her. Dolly once said, "It costs a lot of money to look this cheap, but that joke masks something deeper, a woman who's always been in control of how she's seen." She crafted her persona like armor. The big hair, the bold outfits, the over-the-top charm. But underneath it all was a business mastermind who navigated cutthroat industries, personal heartbreak, and crushing expectations with surgical precision. What's remarkable is that through every scandal, rumor, or health scare, Dolly didn't just survive, she thrived. She turned her struggles into songs, her pain into power. Whether it was nearly signing away her music, silently battling depression, or watching trusted friends become enemies, she kept her core intact. And then came a twist no one saw coming. Her transition from legend to cultural phenomenon. Younger generations who didn't grow up on Jolene or 9 to 5 started discovering her, not just for her music, but for who she is. When she donated $1 million to help fund the Moderna vaccine during the global pandemic, headlines weren't about the donation. They were about Dolly, once again, stepping up when it mattered most. Her charity work through the Imagination Library has given millions of free books to children around the world. Her business ventures continue to thrive. And yet, she still finds ways to shock the world. Whether it's dropping a rock album in her 70s or performing in a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader outfit at age 77. She does what she wants, on her own terms, always with that signature wink. But make no mistake, she paid a heavy price for her place in history. The sleepless nights, the anxiety, the near breakdowns, these aren't footnotes in her story. They are the story. The fame that brought her into the spotlight also nearly broke her. And yet, she never let it win. Dolly Parton's legacy isn't just built on hits or headlines. It's built on her ability to remain completely, unapologetically herself in a world that demanded otherwise. She never chased approval. She never sold out her soul. She stood still while the world tried to spin her into something else. And maybe that's what makes her truly iconic. Not the voice, not the image, but the refusal to let anyone else write her ending. If you made it this far, you're probably seeing Dolly Parton in a whole new light, not just as a performer, but as a fighter. If her story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more Untold stories, and let us know in the comments, what part of Dolly's journey surprised you the most? Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the brightest stars have the darkest beginnings.